Hello, my name is Jack, and in this webinar I'll be talking about how to use the CodeTrigger plugin within Enterprise Architect to go from database schema design to complete application in just a few minutes without writing a single line of code. So let's get started. Let's have a quick look at SQL Server Management Studio and see the tables available to us in the Northwind sample database. So we can open up Enterprise Architect. I'm using version 11 beta just to make things interesting here, and start up a new project. We'll call it Sparks Demo 100. And we'll make it a database project. So let's import the schema from our Northwind sample database. First of all, I'll get rid of these default items here. So we'll import the DB schema from the database. I've set up the data source name here. So we'll just do an import and get all our tables and entities from the Northwind sample database imported into our Enterprise Architect project. So there we have it. You can create a simple diagram to start with. Let's pick suppliers, products. Here we have a relationship between suppliers and products. We'll pick categories. And we also have a relationship between categories and products. So these entities are defined in the sample database. We're just pulling them out, putting them on a diagram here to show you. Now we begin some development. Let's say we need to extend this schema. So we'll add a couple of tables that we need. We'll say we need a table called Spark Customers. And we need it to have following columns, say Customer's ID, which would be an int. Let's make that customer. We'll make that the primary key, and we'll make it an auto number. Next, we'll put in a new column called customer full name. Let's make that a character field. And so on. That'll do, I think, for that table. And let's say we also need another table which we'll call Sparks Customer Orders. Here we have customer order ID as the primary key. and we'll also make that an auto-num. And let's say we need a new column called category ID. This is an integer. And we also need one called customer ID, which is an integer. And finally, order description. Should be a character field. Something like that. So there we have it. We've modified our sample schema according to our development requirements. Let's make it slightly more interesting by adding some relationships between the new entities we've defined and the pre-existing entities. So we'll use the category ID and the customer ID as foreign keys. So let's add a category ID foreign key here related to pre-existing column on a pre-existing table in the sample database. There we have it. And we'll create one more for customer ID. Should be a relationship, foreign key relationship to one of our new tables. So that's customer ID maps on customer ID. So this is our new improved schema. We'll save that model down. So what we need to do is update the underlying database with the schema changes that we've made. So let's generate the update script here. We'll send it to a file, call it schema1, and we don't need to do all of them. Let's just select the actual tables and relationships that we've created and do generate. That gives us our update script. So what we're going to do now is run that update script against our underlying database. So here we have our underlying database still as it was. Here we'll have our schema, update schema generated by Enterprise Architect. So we'll run that. And that should update our underlying database. Now when we do a refresh, you can see we've got Sparks customer orders and Sparks customer there. So we've gone from our model and schema design down to update the underlying database. So now let's move to the next level of our process. Right. We'll start a new CodeTrigger project because this webinar is all about using CodeTrigger. So here's CodeTrigger as a plugin to Enterprise Architect. We'll open a new CodeTrigger project. We'll call it Sparks Demo 100. What we're going to do is we use the wizard to create an ASP.NET application from the database. So we can do advanced scenarios where you craft everything by hand, or we have WPF here and so on, different setups and scenarios. You can have multi-tier applications and so on. But for the purposes of this webinar, we'll do a DB to ASP.NET application and we'll format it for Visual Studio 2012. We select our data source, we'll call it a Northwind sample. I know it's here, the connection, and catalog is Northwind. So let's test that connection. That's good. So do a create, and the wizard sets about doing all our work for us. So it's gone to the database and it's pulled back a list of all the entities in there. We can do a quick check to see, yes, it's identified Sparks customer orders and Sparks customers. It's allowing us to select which one of these we're interested in, but let's just select all and move to the next tab, which is business objects. And we go here. CodeTrigger starts building up a picture of the problem domain, looking at the entities that we're dealing with, working out what the relationships are between them, building up a representation of the data access objects required and the business access objects required, and the collection management functions that you might need. So here we have the list of all the entities identified. We can select a few that we're interested in, but we'll just select all for the moment. Here's Sparks customer orders. Now we have an option here, because when it the CodeTrigger generates the UI, in this case the ASP.NET web application, you might have a few drop-down lists which are referenced using the foreign keys. So what we don't want is having a combo box or drop-down list that just has a series of numbers in it for category ID. So we have the option to say, well, use this other field instead. Show me friendly names and category names rather than category IDs in those drop-down lists. And somewhere here is where you manage the collection management methods. In other words, I want Sparks customer orders to contain lists of Spark customers, or the other way around. So we're good to go, and all we have to do now is hit the generate button. And that's it. In the grand total of 1.7 seconds, CodeTrigger has generated the code required for us to build and run this application without writing any extra lines of code. There is a tab here which shows us one extra thing we have to do, which is basically a copy and paste job, and we'll come back to it in a minute. So let's have a look at what files have been generated. If we look here at our Explorer folder, we see a folder has been created called Sparks Demo 100, and we have a Visual Studio, and these files have all been generated, and we have a Visual Studio 2012 solution. Firing that up opens up the project for us. Here we can see the generated code, etc. Commented on, so on and so forth. So let's go back to the Things to Do tab here. We copy and paste this line that it says to us, copy and paste this line, tells us where to put it in the default.aspx.cs class. So we go in there, do exactly what it tells us. Default aspx.cs, copy and paste that line, and that's it. At this point we're safe to run this application without doing any more and see what we've been given by CodeTrigger. So let's hit the run. It's building. Build succeeded. Here comes the application. And there we have it. So this is the ASP.NET web application. It's been generated by CodeTrigger. We can look at, say, this is categories. If we do a search, this should give us all results of all the data in the categories table of the Northwind sample database. So it retrieves that, and we can go to Spark's customers, and we'll do a search. Now we know there won't be any data there because we haven't put any in. So let's put James Fielding. Let's insert some customers there. We have a new customer. Let's come back with the alter nom customer ID. Let's do another one, and so we have successfully entered 3 customers using our generated code. We can do a search now. Let's say we want to search for all the customers with full names starting with J. We have 2 records coming back. Let's search for customers named Bob. 1 coming back. So we search for all, and so on. You could choose to edit. And update. Now let's go and create some orders. So we can see that when we do search for orders, there is no actual records coming back because we haven't created any. But we can say that Jane Bean has ordered 5 gallons of skimmed milk. Insert. So we have a new record now with a record ID there. We'll add another one. We'll say grain cereals and say Bob has ordered a ton of cornflakes, and so on. So there we have our working application. Now going back to Enterprise Architect, let's pull in the code that's been generated for us by CodeTrigger back into our model. So we'll do a import source directory. We'll look at where the code's been generated to, pull that back in. And so we're now going from generated code back into populating our model so that we're up to date. Import's complete. Let's look at what we've got here. There we have. This is the imported folder. This is the project. This is the imported folder here. These are all the classes that were generated for us. And have a look at some of them. See the contents of it. That's what it looks like. It's all nicely commented. You have your parameters. It's all fully functional. You've got your properties, your public properties, and so on and so forth. When we look at the diagram here, that should show us, give us a view of the sort of relationships that have been generated or how the classes relate to each other. Let's get that a bit more manageable. That's right. Perhaps we can look at it that way. So these are all the generated classes and the relationships to each other in this simple default options that we selected using the wizard. So this is really the end of the webinar. We've gone from sample database schema. We've imported that into Enterprise Architect. We've modified the schema. We've updated the underlying database. Then we've used our CodeTrigger plugin for Enterprise Architect to select which objects we're interested in and what sort of project that we're interested in and what sort of UI we want. And with a few clicks, we've generated a Visual Studio 2012 compatible solution which runs and works straight out of the box. I trust this is a useful exercise for you to have a look at and show you what the capabilities are with CodeTrigger for Enterprise Architect.